everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm going to be reviewing Shadowhunters Season 2, Episode 12, You Are Not Your Own. And I'm going to be diving right in and discussing this week's episode, so if you haven't watched it yet, go and watch it. The link will be down below where you can stream the episode and then you can come back and we can discuss together. With that being said, I'm going to say goodbye to the non-spoiler people and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. So I definitely enjoyed this week's episode a lot more than last week's episode. I think that's because we're starting to plant the seeds for where we're going to be going with the rest of the season, but pretty much this whole episode is dealing with the aftermath of the premiere and dealing with this whole body switching plot line where Magnus is in Valentine's body and Valentine is in Magnus's body. So after watching this episode 2 times through, I really don't understand what this plot line accomplished or what the purpose of it was. By the time you get to the end of this week's episode, Valentine is back captive with all of the New York Shadowhunters and Magnus is still Magnus. There really wasn't a lot of chaos or things that were caused or a lot of damage that was done to sort of make this plot line important to anything that's going to happen throughout the rest of the season. And so because of that, I'm just a little bit confused. We had 2 major outcomes that came from this plot line of these 2 characters switching bodies, and it's this Herondale lineage plot line, which I'll be discussing a little bit more towards the end of this review, and then the Agony Rune. And the Agony Rune I'm still a little bit fuzzy with. Basically what it does is it brings out your worst childhood memories, things that you've tried to repress. And so with Valentine, we see that memory with the little boy inside the flaming pentagram and him like screaming for help. And then with Magnus, we see like a vision of him as a little boy and he talks about how horrible those memories were. So now with Magnus having experienced that, is that going to in any way bring out the memories that we saw with Valentine and then explain the importance of those? Because there has to be some significance to why they're using this rune and why they would show us those memories. So I'm just a little bit fuzzy as to how that's going to go about and if that's the reason why they created this entire plotline. And if so, I think there was a lot more effective things that they could have done to get this information out into the open and to be able to tell the stories that they need to tell and reveal these sources of information. Because as for right now, I just think that this plotline was kind of ridiculous and a little bit unnecessary because I don't think anything really came of it. But let's talk about the 2 main characters that are involved in this plotline and the actors that play them and how they did. So we have Alan Van Sprague, who plays Valentine, and I think that Alan absolutely killed it in this week's episode. The emotion, fear, and pain that he has to step into and being Magnus was just depicted perfectly. Because for Alan, he has to think about what it is that Magnus is going through, the fear and the emotion and the worries that are going through his head, because he's inside Valentine's body. He pretty much has no way of escaping, and there's nobody that really believes him, especially Alec, and he sees that Alec, could be the person who ends up putting him to his death. It's a very traumatic thing, and so Alan has to be able to channel into all of those fears and insecurities that Magnus has in this moment. And I think that, again, like I said, he does it perfectly, and I was so impressed with his performance because for so much of this episode, he's like crying and sobbing and just like completely and entirely breaking down into a very raw form we've never seen of Valentine. And I think that that's really great because he was able to distinguish the Valentine from Magnus and was able to just create this divide between the 2 characters. You were able to see a distinguishable difference between the 2, which is really, really important when you're dealing with this type of plotline because it's very easy to get confused. And again, I say this every week that I'm always so impressed with Alan Van Sprague and what he's able to bring to this show. And when you're dealing with a plotline like this that I feel like is relatively average, to have an actor be able to be this impressive and be able to bring that much to this episode and into this plotline is really, really impressive. And if Alan Van Sprague can do this on a show that is relatively mediocre, I can't even imagine what he's like in a major production. And I would love to then get to see more from him then, knowing how spectacular he is in Shadowhunters, and it makes me want to watch other productions of his because I think that he could bring a lot to those productions if they're bigger major productions compared to Shadowhunters, which again is relatively average and mediocre. So I really want to see more from Alan Van Sprague because, like I said, I was very, very impressed with him in this week's episode and the emotional breakdown that he was able to have and the way that he was able to portray Magnus, I feel like very properly in terms of the fears and insecurities that he was going through in this week's episode. So then we have to talk about Harry. I feel like Harry drew the short end of the stick in this week's episode. I wanted him to play more into Valentine's manipulativeness and to be able to show a change in personality because I don't really think there was one. And being an actor, you have to be able to show a divide between the 2 characters that you're playing. So for Harry, he's playing Magnus, but he's also playing Valentine, but he's one person. So he has to show a divide between the 2 personalities when he's normally playing Magnus, and now in this week's episode when he's playing Valentine. And I didn't see much of that divide like I was able to see with Alan's performance, where there's a strong divide between his performance as Valentine and his performance as Magnus. And so I wish that I could have seen that. And of course it wasn't really written into the script and there wasn't a lot of room for it, but I feel like as an actor, he should have made that decision and should have been able to have a stronger performance in this week's episode, because I really didn't feel that much of it. There were bits and pieces, but it wasn't enough to really strongly convince me, because like I said, I really didn't see that much change in personality. So I wish I could have seen more from him and get to see him grow a little bit more in terms of his talent and get to expand and be a little bit more versatile in his performance, but I really didn't get that from this week's episode, and I wish that I could have seen more from him. So now I'm gonna bring up two sort of WTF things that I just kind of was a little bit frustrated by. The first is Azazel getting banished. So I feel like this was just really convenient. Pretty much what ends up happening, Alec walks in to Magnus's loft, he sees Azazel, immediately goes, pulls out his bow and arrow, and just shoots it right into Azazel's chest, and boom, he turns into just dust. And here's the thing, not even like 2 minutes earlier, we're having this conversation about how unlikely it is to banish Azazel by just like using a weapon or something, that there's a very specific precision that would have to be taken to get rid of him because he's a greater demon, and there's a very specific area that you have to hit, and it'd be very unlikely that you'd be able to do that. And I'm not saying that Alec isn't a skilled archer and that this isn't something that he would be capable of, but it just feels contradictory to say that it's very difficult to banish Azazel and that it'd be very difficult to do that with a weapon, but then 2 minutes later it just happens like that. So again, these inconsistencies with Shadowhunters need to stop, because they need to be able to have one smooth and fluid plotline, and they need to sort of make a decision about which is it. Is it easy to banish him? Is it not? And I just didn't like the inconsistencies there, and I wish that they had just been more concise in terms of how they wanted to do this, because it just felt very convenient for them in their plotline, even though it contradicted with something that they had said earlier in the episode. So then we have this scene between Magnus and Valentine that I was just really frustrated with, and I can't even tell you why. I just didn't like it at all. But Valentine is locked up and he's in this sort of like glass cage-ish thing. Then Magnus comes walking in and he tells Valentine, I'm gonna get you out of here, and I put a ward on myself, so like an invisibility cloak, so like nobody's gonna see me at all, and we'll be able to just get you in and out here like that. And then Valentine goes to Magnus and he's like, ha, yeah, not gonna happen because I put wards up. Your invisibility spell cloak-ish thing is not going to work. And then Magnus goes, tries it anyway, doesn't work, and then here comes Inquisitor Herondale, and then she sees him and then ends up like banishing him. I don't know, I just felt frustrated because again, Magnus isn't stupid, and even though I know that Magnus is Valentine, the whole thing frustrated me, and I just like, I can't, like I said, I can't even tell you why. It just frustrated me, bottom line. Then we have Will Tudor, who is killing it as Sebastian. He's playing Sebastian as of right now in the way that I would interpret it, very alluring and mysterious and charming, and you're very drawn to his character because there's just something about him that seems so eclectic in a way that you're just drawn to him because you know there's more to find out about him. And so because of that, you're very interested in what it is that he has to say because he is this new character, and I feel like he's playing that role really well, and I'm so excited to get to see more from him because in terms of the things that we have to explore with Sebastian, it's gonna go to some really dark places, and we're gonna get to see a wide span of emotions and performance from Will Tudor in the way that he has to play Sebastian, and it's gonna be a very, I guess, I want to say colorful performance because we're gonna get to see a lot from him in the way that he has to play Sebastian and the things that Sebastian is going to go through as a character, and I'm very excited because so far I've been very impressed with his performance. But the one moment where it really clicked for me and I was just totally like signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours, and just convinced was this moment where Clary is trying to draw this rune to break down the wards on Magnus's loft, and she can't do it. She's been having trouble with it the entire episode. Sebastian goes up to her and says, you don't even have a father. Your father will never love you. Your mother's dead. She's not coming back. And Jace, who you thought was your brother, is not your brother. You have no family left, and you're gonna have to live with this for the rest of your life, and it's gonna be painful and it's gonna hurt. Feel about how painful that is. And his facial expressions and the way that he just looks so dark, and you're seeing those bits and pieces of his character, I was just so blown away by and just so impressed by. And it was that moment where I felt that real inner Sebastian that we're gonna get to see as the season goes on, and getting just that tiny little glimpse just had me so convinced and so sold that he is going to be an amazing Sebastian once we get to some of those reveals and some of those points where we start to find out more about his character and start to see his true colors. I'm just hecka excited because his facial expressions and just everything felt so genuine to Sebastian, and we're starting to see those glimpses, and I was just so impressed. So I think that as for right now, the casting decision for Will Tudor as Sebastian, I am on board for, and I cannot wait to see more from him because the more that we get to see of him this season, I think the more impressed I will be. Alright, so then we have this plot line between Simon and Izzy that I'm kind of frustrated with, and it's this moment where where Simon wants to get Raphael off his back because Raphael's being a little bit of a bully, and so he goes to Izzy because he knows that Izzy and Raphael have been having a little bit of a thing. So then Izzy agrees to help him by taking Simon to Raphael's sister and taking a picture of them and then sending that to Raphael. So then in my notes, I literally have written in all caps, why is this smart? There is nothing good that can come from this, and it just doesn't seem like it's gonna work out good either way. And there's two specific things that really came to mind as to why this would not be a good decision. Number one, I think that seeing that picture of Simon and his sister Raphael could be a little bit jealous because he sees that Simon is able to go out into the daylight and able to talk and have conversations with his sister and able to do all these things that he is not able to do being a regular vampire. And so with that, I feel like it's a little bit of jealousy and upset that he isn't able to have that relationship with his sister, and so that's something that may be a way to cause him to lash out at Simon. And then we also have the fact that he is probably very protective of his sister, so to see Simon, who he doesn't really like, with his sister probably isn't very good. So either way, regardless of which it is, if it's jealousy or if it's protectiveness or if it's a little bit of both, which I think that it is, that didn't seem like that would end well. And I mean, Simon seemed very hesitant throughout all of it, but still didn't seem like it was gonna end well, and that's exactly what ends up happening. Basically, Raphael and this group of like 4 of the vampires end up coming and wanting to take Simon down, but it's during the day, so then Simon goes and like walks into the sunlight, and all the other vampires are immediately afraid of him, and he basically shouts at them like, go, leave, and so they leave. But now all of them know that he is a daylighter, and so the rumor's probably gonna spread, and now Simon has a little bit of a target on his back. So I'm glad that we're getting to see that plotline develop, because that needed to happen. We needed to have this widespread outbreak of the fact that Simon is a daylighter. We need to have all these other vampires finding out, because that's what causes some problems, and that's where we lead Simon in the proper direction with this plotline. But I feel like the whole way of getting there felt really ridiculous, because these characters aren't stupid, and it feels like we're having them make stupid decisions to get to the essential plotline that we need to get to, and I feel like that's just sort of frustrating. And I didn't like the plotline at all because, again, this is stupid. It wasn't going to end well at all. Finally, we have this Herondale lineage plotline that comes in at the end of the episode, and we find out that Jace is a Herondale and that he is Imogen Herondale's grandson. Here's the thing. Again, this is coming way too early. We're getting a lot of these major reveals just right off the bat this season. I would be okay with it if it was executed properly, but it's not executed properly at all. There's a reason why Cassie wrote certain things that she did in the book, and the reason why she established a certain plotline, and it would just be respectful of the writers and of the showrunners to execute that plotline properly. It all sort of forms nicely then with all of these other series that she's writing in the Shadowhunter Chronicles. It needs to sort of go a certain way in order for everything to link up at the end. They're just kind of like throwing it in there, and it was a mess. So how this plotline is supposed to go in the books, and I don't mind spoiling anybody because it has the same end result, we bring in Inquisitor Herondale in City of Ashes, and we really only refer to her as the Inquisitor. We never really know what her lineage is. All we know is that her son died, and that her and Jace have a little bit of a rift, and that they're never really close. But then we have this major boat scene towards the end of City of Ashes, and Imogen goes on the boat. Her and Jace sort of share a moment, and then Imogen ends up dying. And then with that, there's a new Inquisitor that comes in, and it's about towards like the middle of City of Glass, which is the next book in the series, that Jace finds out his Herondale lineage from Jocelyn. And with that, then he's also able to get a whole bunch of pictures and mementos from Amadis, who is Luke's sister, because she was once married to a Herondale. And so he starts to find out more about his father, and he kind of has this moment, I believe, where he's sitting on a dock in Idris, and he's kind of just like taking it all in, and it's a big thing that he goes through. Then it's not until City of Heavenly Fire, Clary ends up getting a ring from Tessa that belonged to James Herondale, and then Clary ends up giving that ring to Jace eventually. A lot of that just was sort of crammed into like 30 seconds of the episode. We do get the information from the books, but again, it's not executed properly, and I would have liked it to have been more genuine to Cassie in the books in the way that she wrote it, because she plotted everything together so perfectly to have Jace be the only Herondale alive, because that is like that moment that he could have had with Imogen that he didn't get, and it's like he understands her a little bit more, and it's just very beautiful in the way that Cassie writes it. And I'm just frustrated that it seems like we're throwing all this book content in to the plot line of this show just right in the very beginning to be done with it, so that the writers can do whatever they want and they don't have to feel held back by Cassie's writing and her works. And it's just very disrespectful, because this whole entire idea and your whole entire employment is coming from Cassie's books, so you should at least treat them respectfully. But I do have to say that at least the last scene was very beautiful. You have this moment where Imogen then goes up to Jace and she gives him the Herondale ring on a necklace and puts it around his neck, and basically the last line of the show was like, you're about to find out what it's like to be a Herondale. And it's this moment where now Jace is going to have to come into this new Lady Age and sort of find out more about himself and his parents and sort of come into himself and his identity, and he's going to go through a little bit of identity crisis. At least that's what he goes through in the books. So hopefully we get to see that, but I just wish that it had been executed more properly, because this is a plotline that's really important to this show and into this series, and it just feels like it was really rushed. So that sort of wraps up my review for episode 12 of Shadowhunters. I really didn't have that many thoughts because the bulk of this episode was the whole body switching plotline, and again, not really a lot happened there, but I did enjoy some aspects of the episode. I just felt kind of bored watching it. That's sort of how I felt with last week's episode as well, and I want to get to see more from this show, more excitement, more action, and that a lot of things are executed properly, and so far I'm not really getting that. I hope it gets better as the second half of the season goes along. But if you want to comment down below your favorite part of the episode or what your thoughts are on my review, let me know. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next week with my review of episode 13 of Shadowhunters. Bye guys!